Xavier Abu Eid is a political analyst. He's joining us now from Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Let's talk about these shirts first of all, but in the wider context of the fact that Israel has been very critical of the way that Israeli captives have been treated, it says, by Hamas and by Islamic Jihad. And yet, of course, we're seeing these pictures of these Palestinian prisoners being released wearing these particular shirts with these slogans and the Star of David on it. How does that affect Israel's concern and irritation about the way, the allegations they're making about the way the Israeli captives are being treated?
Thank you, Rob. I think we have been analyzing throughout all those weeks the amount of humiliation against Palestinian prisoners, which is not something new. But all prisoners that were released over the past few weeks, they've been saying that, of course, after October the 7th, under the orders of Itamar Ben-Gvir, when he was the Minister of National Security, things became extremely difficult. They defined jails as being as hell with regards to access to food, medical treatment. And let's all remember that until now, we have over 10,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, and none of them have been granted a fair trial. So those are the basics before getting into this latest state of humiliation that, by the way, it does not only affect the prisoners, but they're also caused by the families of Palestinian prisoners against the threats they have received from Israeli services as well.
Javier, I want to widen this out and talk about the ceasefire. Just bear with me while I just remind people about what's going to be happening next. The ceasefire deal agreed between Israel and Hamas includes the release of all Israeli captives over 3 phases. Now, in the first phase, 33 Israeli captives held in Gaza were expected to be exchanged for nearly 2,000 Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons. So far, Palestinian factions have released 19 Israeli captives, while Israel has freed 1,135 Palestinians. 2 more exchanges are expected to take place during this phase, one on February the 22nd and another on March the 1st. The second phase of the agreement is due to begin the same day. The remaining 59 Israeli captives are to be exchanged for more Palestinian prisoners. At least 35 of the Israelis have been confirmed dead. As part of this phase, Israeli forces have agreed to fully withdraw from Gaza and a permanent ceasefire is to be established. Hamas and Israel are expected to hold indirect negotiations on the implementation of this phase early next week. So let's go back to our guest, Xavier Abu Eid. In terms of the ceasefire itself, given the fact that we've seen this exchange of Palestinian prisoners and Israeli captives, where do you think we stand in terms of the progression of the ceasefire?
So far, as with the numbers you just gave to the audience, people have to figure out that we have only 2 more releases scheduled and a large number of Palestinian prisoners to be released. That will be, of course, a question. Then we have to talk about what's the political will that you are going to find in Israel to continue. The statement released by President Trump today basically gives an open check for Israel, for the Israeli government to either continue or to go back to war in Gaza with all that this entails. Let's remember that in Israel, almost 80% of the Israeli Jewish population supports, according to surveys in Israeli media, the plans of President Trump for ethnic cleansing. That's another element to be added to the equation. And I would add a last element, which is we have to witness what will be the trade-offs that will be dealt with within the Israeli government within the next few days and weeks, particularly because not all Israeli ministers support concluding phase 1. Some people are saying, let's extend phase 1. Some people are saying, let's not get to phase 2, because what you were saying is like this. Getting to phase 2 means that you end any presence of the Israeli army in Gaza on one side, you declare the end of the war, and you move into the release of other prisoners, including some very important Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails that many people here in Palestine are waiting for their release, particularly the case of Marwan al-Barghouthi, who is, according to all surveys, the most popular Palestinian leader.
Javier, for now, thank you very much indeed. That's Xavier Abu Eid, a political analyst. He's been talking to us from Bethlehem. Thank you. We'll go to Alon Pinkas. He's a former Consul General of Israel in New York. He's joining us from Tel Aviv. So thank you very much indeed, as always, for being with us. I want to just follow up on something that Javier was mentioning with regards to the second phase, because the second phase of the ceasefire agreement does have some very significant elements to it, not least, as Javier was mentioning, of course, the continued withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza and the final exchange of Palestinian prisoners. Yet, it seems as though Benjamin Netanyahu has been comparatively quiet with regards to the exchange that we've just seen. Why do you think, or where do you think, the Netanyahu coalition stands with regard to the second stage of the ceasefire now?
Well, to be honest, Rob, I don't think there will be a second phase. And that is because the second phase, as you yourself mentioned a moment ago, includes not only a permanent ceasefire, but also it begins with a forced reduction, and 8 days later ends with a almost full Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. And that means almost inevitably that Hamas stays in power. Now, it's not the power that they had. They have been degraded militarily in a very significant way. I doubt they can emerge out of this militarily. But politically, they do maintain residual power. And most importantly, there's no substitute replacement force or political power that could fill the vacuum. Mr. Netanyahu knows this. This is why he's keeping mum about this. This is why he's not saying anything. Because basically, he, like you, like me, like many of our viewers, don't really understand and can't really figure out what is it that Donald Trump means when he posts all these things that contradict the things he posted the day or 2 days earlier. Meaning that what Mr. Trump posted today, immediately after the release of the 3 Israeli hostages and the reciprocal release of Palestinian prisoners, was that, quote unquote, it now remains to be seen what Israel will do in terms of the deadline it imposed. Parenthetically, no one imposed such a headline, only Trump in a previous post. The deadline that Israel imposed for 12 p.m. Eastern time, that is in 2 hours, roughly in 2 hours here in Israel, according to which all prisoners need to be released unconditionally. Now, that's not going to happen. And so Mr. Netanyahu doesn't know, and he's playing for time. Time means, in this respect, Rob, time in this respect, Rob, means stalling the negotiations. And that's exactly what I think he's going to do, which is why I'm pessimistic about the implementation of the second phase.
But we mustn't lose sight of the fact that part of the second phase is, of course, the release of the remaining 59 Israeli captives. Now, as we say, we understand that maybe 35 of those Israelis may be dead, but the bodies, of course, should be returned to their families and friends. And that must be a sticking point for Benjamin Netanyahu. We've seen the protests that have been happening in Israel demanding that the remaining captives are returned.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the professor from Bethlehem who spoke to you a moment ago, I forgot his name, so forgive me. Javier. Okay. Yeah. He said an absolute correct thing. He said, 80% of the Israeli public want this deal to be done, and that includes the end of the war, not just the release of the hostages, dead or alive, but the end of the war. Now, if the war ends and Hamas has this residual power, political power that I alluded to a moment ago, then Netanyahu may find himself without a coalition, which then raises an even broader question. If Hamas is still in Gaza and Israel does begin negotiations over the phase 2, what then happens with the Trump bombastic statement that we will own Gaza, we will take Gaza, we will rebuild Gaza, we will expel, relocate, move, we'll call it what you want, ethnic cleanse, 2.3 million Palestinians, we will build a Riviera. How is that going to happen? And Netanyahu knows that, 48 hours from now, maybe less, maybe slightly more, but around that time, Trump is going to move to a different toy to play with. Ukraine, Greenland, tariffs, what have you, and he will be stuck with the negotiations that he doesn't want to conclude, yet doesn't know exactly what the Americans expect of him.
As always, it's very interesting to get your thoughts on this. Alon Pinkas, former Consul General of Israel in New York. So thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rob.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.